Let me turn for the next few moments to health care.
Charlie, you really answered the question. You answered it in your question, because you said, how can we afford $1 trillion war and we can't afford health care? Well, that's the reason. The resources are going overseas. We're fighting $1 trillion war, and we shouldn't be doing it. Those resources should be spent back here at home. There is an inflationary factor. We can't afford it. We do have good medical care, but the costs are so high now that our people in this country are actually going to India and getting their heart surgery done. They pay the plane ticket, the hospital, and the hotel, and they get it for half price. So it's inflation. But if you don't understand how inflation comes, we can't solve this problem. It comes from deficit financing with this warmongering foreign policy we have. We run up the deficits, we tax, we borrow from the Chinese, we can't borrow enough. Then what do? We print the money, and then you wonder where the inflation comes? If the value of the dollar goes down and prices go up, where the government gets involved in certain things like housing or medical care or education, prices are skyrocketing. So you have to deal with the monetary issue to solve the problem of the medical issue.
Senator Thompson?
I think there's 2 points I'd like to make. One, I get a little bit worried when we talk about the tamper-proof ID for illegals or immigrants, because how do you do that? Anybody that is an immigrant or looks like an immigrant would have to have an ID, and then you can't discriminate, so everybody's going to have the ID. I think it's opening the door for the national ID, and we should be very, very careful about that. But the one thing that we haven't talked about here is about the economics of illegal immigration. You can't solve this problem as long as you have the runaway welfare state and excessive spending and the wiping out of the middle class through inflation, because that's what directs the hostility, is people are hurting. And then when we have all these mandates on the hospitals and on our schools, and no wonder, the incentives are there. There's an incentive for a lot of our people not to work because they can get welfare, and then there's a lot of incentives because they know they're going to get amnesty. We gave it to the illegals in the 80s, and then we put mandates on the states to compel them to have medical care, and you say, well, that's compassionate, but what happens if the hospital closes and then the people here in this country don't get medical care? So you can't divorce it from the economics. You've got to get rid of the incentives, no amnesty, and no forced benefits, because obviously they'll bring their families, and it just won't work if you try to see this in a vacuum, and you have to deal with it as a whole, as an economic issue as well.
Sure.
You know, it's interesting that you asked this question, because we have a lot of similarities. Matter of fact, Barack Obama and myself, because our campaign is made up of the young people. And frequently we will have young people joining us that came from the Barack Obama's campaign, and we're very pleased. But Barack spoke out against the war before it started, and he respects civil liberties, and I respect him for that. But the question is why would it be? I assume it's because of the similarity in the age of us two candidates that the young people are attracted to us. But it's the youthfulness of the ideas that bring the young people to us. But there is a difference between what Barack Obama is talking about, because he does give hope to young people, and that's what happens in our campaign. But I talk a lot more about different kind of economic policies. I talk about personal liberty and the right to people's personal life, and getting stopping these wars and coming home and having a sensible monetary policy, and young people like this. But Barack Obama is not going to talk about the goal of getting rid of the income tax and dealing with monetary policy. I mean, he is too much into the welfare state issue, not quite understanding how free market economics is the truly compassionate system. If we care about the poor and want to help the poor, you have to have free markets. You can't have a welfare state in order to try to take care of people.
Let me move on. People in this state and everywhere are worried about gas prices. When 2007 began, oil was $61 a barrel. It was $100 last week. We haven't even begun to see the demand that India and China is going to put on the world's oil markets. Don't you have to, in the end, level with people that gas prices are at this level to stay, and if anything, they're going to go higher? And isn't not to do so intellectual dishonesty? Anybody? Good.
I'll be glad to answer that question, because it's something I talk about all the time, and it's a very important question. The Wall Street Journal yesterday had a very good chart that explains this. If you look at the price of oil in the last 10 years, if you look at it in terms of dollars, it went up 350%. If you look at it in euros, it went up about 200%. If you look at it in the price of gold, it stayed flat. It's the inflation, it's the printing of money, it's the destruction of the value of the dollar. Added on to this, the notion that we go to protect our oil. Oil was $27 when we went over there to get the oil and protect the oil and take the oil from Iraq. There's less than about half the production now in Iraq right now, and we're threatening Iran, and that pushes prices up. It pushes up the concept of supply and demand. But you can't deal with the price of oil without dealing with the supply and demand of dollars. When you devalue the dollar, and the dollar is going down every day, and the further the dollar goes down, the higher the prices of oil going up. We have to understand that.
Senator?